Welcome back to Fast Market here on the Schwab Network. It's time for our cash tag segment, so let's bring in Andy Swan. He's a co-founder of LikeFolio. Welcome back to the show, Andy.
Thank you. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday to you. We're talking Best Buy ahead of earnings tomorrow morning. Stock's really lagging so far this year and the overall market. And I put something out there on Twitter asking people where they get their electronics from. Amazon leading the way, followed by Best Buy, and then Costco at this point. What kind of data are you guys seeing out of LikeFolio? Is it supporting the weakness in the stock at this point?
Yeah, it is. I think the stock's pretty well priced here. And it's funny, you talk about electronics, and if you'd asked me 3 years ago, 5 years ago, where Best Buy would be today, I would have probably said it's going the way of Blockbuster. It feels like, why do we need Best Buy? But I think the company has done a very good job of pivoting, getting some subscription type of services going in there, and some of those higher end electronics. I think, unfortunately for Best Buy, the one thing that we're seeing kind of disappoint us, especially right now, is web traffic. So those digital sales, we're seeing web traffic down 8% on a year-over-year basis. And why this is important is because we really think that the back-to-school season, the back-to-school shopping season, should have been and should be a lot better for Best Buy than it is right now. As a function of back-to-school shopping, the demand for electronics is far greater than it was even 5 or 10 years ago. Certainly when I was a kid, it was Trapper Keepers, notebooks and stickers and pencils. Now it's tablets and laptops. And so we really expected Best Buy to get a really nice move in August in terms of web visits, in terms of mentions on social media. We're really just not seeing that. It's just a little bit disappointing. And what that tells us is that Best Buy perhaps is not top of mind for consumers. And the reason that we're so interested in the back to school season isn't just because of the back to school revenues, which I think disappoint, but I think it tells us how much optimism the company probably has about its consumer base going into this call and whether or not they'll be able to guide higher or lower. And so if we had to guess at this point, based on what we're seeing back to school season, they probably either keep things the same or maybe even reiterate their call from last earnings that they're seeing some recessionary type behavior from their consumer base.
Andy, I'm an economics major, so let's make assumptions, right? Let's start off this discussion by making assumptions, which is, let's assume that a large percentage of the U.S. population bought new computers during COVID, right?
Yep.
That's a fair assumption, right? You saw these things happen. If the data that I read, a computer speed doubles the speed of a computer every 1.5 to 2 years, and heavy used computers need to be replaced about every 3 years, consumer computers less used every 4 years, aren't we about to come into a big cycle of people from COVID replacing those machines? And shouldn't that favor a company like Best Buy that has relatively low price? It's sold off a little bit, but and they do a great job with headcount and expenses, and they stay lean and agile. Isn't this makeup cycle setting up well for them?
Yeah, it's setting up well, but it's setting up for a really long time. We would have expected to start to see some of that already at this point. And I think especially this summer, we would have expected to see considerably more than we have seen. It's not just computers, it's also those large TVs that are on people's walls. A lot of the larger electronic items that we purchase, COVID, that whole thing in 2020 really sparked a lot of earlier than normal replacement cycle purchasing. And so you're right, we would expect that replacement cycle to be kicking in. We would have expected it even earlier this year, but I do think that the economy overall has given people a little bit of a pause and given people a little bit of a reason to kind of kick the can down the road on those replacement purchases a little bit longer than normal. So it is possible that Best Buy's kind of lackluster performance or disappointment this year could turn into a really big year in 2024 macroeconomic things start to turn around and we get that replacement cycle at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of that depend if the economy stays pretty robust with the consumer.
Yeah.
They don't get jammed up.
Sure,
a little bit.
layoffs don't do anything for computer sales,
No,
right?
not at all. Yeah, and inflationary pressures, just the day-to-day living. But Andy, when you look at this, as far as happiness levels, you guys talk about that a lot with your data. I mean, how do you measure that? Because I don't go to Best Buy like I did 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, probably even less. I'll look at Costco, I'll look at Amazon for better pricing or maybe just ease. Are you seeing happiness levels deteriorate, and do you have an earnings score on this one going into the report?
Yeah, the good news, I think, for Best Buy's consumer happiness levels pretty flat. They're holding on to that. I think their services businesses are pretty good. Some of their appliance business, consumers like going there, which is not the first place I think of when I think of appliances, but they have a pretty good footprint there. And so going into this report, our data overall is neutral because the stock is lagging. And so we had kind of a negative slant on our data, and the stock has a negative slant on that. I do think that, from what we've seen from the retail sector so far, this earnings cycle, risk clearly is to the downside. And I don't think that the company is going to be in a position to come out and say, we're expecting a really big holiday season in fourth quarter. I just don't see the data to support that.
All right. Great stuff. Great data as always, Andy. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. That's Andy Swan, co-founder at LikeFolio, breaking down the data for us on Best Buy. Kev, I think it would bring up good points. It's like people have maybe they're exhausted from what they purchased at the start of the pandemic.